Hi, this is Gail reading from this week's edition of the Provincetown Independent. The first story is about public safety. Woman drowns in swift currents off Hatches Harbor. Nancy Gear, 81, was caught in water rushing out of the tidal lagoon. A family trip to Herring Cove Beach turned deadly on Friday, August 14th, when 3 swimmers were carried out to sea by a strong current emerging from Hatches Harbor, a tidal lagoon of more than 200 acres that lies just north of the beach. Town harbor master, staff, and firefighters pulled 2 family members from the water about 15 minutes after the first 911 call came in, according to Provincetown Harbor Master Pete Wynn. A third person, 81-year-old Nancy Gear of New York, was recovered from the ocean in critical condition after an hour-long search aided by a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter. A Coast Guard boat crew pulled Gear from the water roughly 100 yards offshore and about a mile northwest of the spot where the Hatches Harbor Inlet meets Herring Cove Beach, Wynn said. She was taken to Cape Cod Hospital, where she was pronounced dead, according to Provincetown Police Chief Greg Hennick. Gear taught English as a second language at Bronx Community College for 4 decades, according to Richard Ginsburg, Assistant Vice President of Communications for the college. She started teaching in Kenya with no formal training and retired last year, but continued to teach part-time. Wynn said the powerful tidal outflow from Hatches Harbor can cause confusing, shifting currents with rip current-like effects when it meets the open waters of Herring Cove. In this case, it appears the waters exiting Hatches Harbor met the ocean and turned nearly 180 degrees, Wynn said, making it very confusing for people on shore to know where to look and complicating the search zone for rescuers. The first 911 call was placed from Herring Cove North, that is, the parking lot and beach area north of the Cape Cod National Seashore's Herring Cove Bathhouse, at 2:57 p.m. on Friday. Wynn said, within 2 or 3 minutes, he said, the town's first boat left McMillan Pier with a firefighter on board. McMillan Pier is almost 7 miles away by water from the inlet to Hatches Harbor, however. The harbor master boat arrived at Herring Cove roughly 15 minutes later, and crew members quickly pulled 2 family members, including Nancy Gear's son, from the water. A second harbor master boat, 2 nearby Good Samaritan vessels, the towboat U.S. Provincetown Private Rescue Boat, and then the U.S. Coast Guard boat and helicopter joined the search, Wynn said. The helicopter ultimately located Gear in the water, just off the Race Point Lighthouse. The Coast Guard boat's crew performed CPR and transported her to the Coast Guard station in Provincetown, where a fire department ambulance met the boat to take her to the hospital, Wynn said. Captain Mike Rathberger, who was fishing from his boat off Hatches Harbor when Gear went missing, told the Independent that he saw the helicopter approach from the south across the bay and hover over the spot where she was recovered. Rathberger, who writes a fishing column for the Independent, said that Friday was one of the calmest days on the water he'd seen all summer. The water's surface was like a sheet of glass, he said. Despite the lack of wind, the National Weather Service had forecast a moderate rip current risk for Provincetown that Friday afternoon. While local wind often contributes to rip currents, they are driven by water and wave dynamics, according to Mark Borelli, director of the Seafloor Mapping Program at the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown. A rip current forms when waves pile water up along the shore, and that water must drain back out to sea, often in narrow channels where it can rush seaward like a fast-moving river, Borelli said. Herring Cove is unusual in that it rests on a broad, shallow platform of sand that drops off steeply into deep water. The result, Borelli said, of thousands of years of sand eroding off the outer cape and slowly filling a big hole in the ocean just north of High Head. Rip currents are not common at Herring Cove. I've never really heard of a powerful rip current setting up out there, Borelli said. The Cape Cod National Seashore's Public Information Office told the Independent in an unsigned email that Friday's incident occurred well outside of the lifeguarded area. Although the National Seashore has a public information officer, Lindsay French, emails to the Seashore now get responses without any name or signature attached. The lifeguard station in front of the bathhouse at Herring Cove Beach used to be staffed 7 days a week in summer, but this season it is watched by lifeguards only on weekends through August 23rd, the unsigned email said. The National Seashore lifeguards, who ultimately arrived on the scene, traveled from Head of the Meadow Beach in Truro. We did not receive enough applications for our lifeguard positions this year to fully staff 7 days a week. We are hopeful with continued recruitment efforts to have enough applicants to staff all 6 of our beaches for the summer of 2027. Wynn said that more than 80% of surf beach rescues are triggered by rip or other ocean currents, and that hundreds of people nationwide fall victim to these currents every year. According to the National Weather Service, an average of 76 people per year died because of rip currents in the U.S. over the last 10 years. This is truly a tragedy that we are lucky is relatively rare in our waters, Wynn said, adding that even strong swimmers can be overcome by a current. Wynn said that about a week before Friday's search and rescue, the Harbor Master's office helped rescue a group of people who had crossed the Hatches Harbor Inlet at low tide and then couldn't get back once the tide came in and the narrow channel was flooded. We're grateful they didn't try to cross it, Wynn said. Never enter fast-flowing water you don't feel comfortable in above your knees. And call 911 if you are stranded and need to be rescued, he said. An article about disaster relief. Local Venezuelans rally after the 2nd June earthquakes. Another powerful earthquake hit Western Colombia on August 10th. When Willie Garcia first came to Provincetown in 2007, the Latino community was so small, he said, that it was barely 10 of us, 2 from Venezuela. Garcia was born in San Cristobal, a city in the mountainous western part of the country. He moved to Miami at 17 and then to Provincetown at 32. The Latino community here has grown, but there are still only about 10 people here from Venezuela, he said. This summer, that small group has been moved to action by a devastating pair of earthquakes on June 24th that killed at least 6,000 people along Venezuela's Caribbean coast. In response to the tragedy, Garcia, who now owns 2 restaurants in Provincetown, the Hideaway and Helltown Kitchen, welcomed 163 diners to Helltown on July 1st for an earthquake relief fundraiser. Proceeds from the event, representing total sales plus donations, were given to the We Love Foundation and the Fundación Hogar Bambi, Garcia said. Thank God my family is fine, Garcia said, but I know so many people. I grew up there. It's just heartbreaking, and I felt like I had to do something. Although most of the people at Garcia's fundraiser were not South American, quite a few were. Among them were Verlin Daly, who is from Venezuela, and has a vacation home with her husband, Thomas Daly, in North Truro. Look how quickly the Venezuelan community came together to help their neighbors, Daly said. Venezuela has been through so much suffering, and it hurts to see it is happening even more. But we come together to help each other. Richard Stumo, who is co-owner of the Latin Corner in Provincetown's Aquarium Mall, comes from Cartagena, Colombia, which was luckily far from the earthquake, he said. But the effects, he said, ripple across the country. As soon as Stumo learned the news, he began calling family, friends, everybody I knew who was there. Another of the Latin Corner's co-owners, Laura Lopera, is from Medellin, only 100 miles from the epicenter of the quake. She was home visiting her mother when the earthquake occurred. Her family is also safe, Stumo said. We've been keeping in touch and just hearing about what it's like. It's so heartbreaking, he said. Stumo is now also working on a fundraiser to help two friends in Dos Quebradas, Colombia, who are making meals for people affected by the quake. They're trying to make 100 lunches a day to distribute, Stumo said. As a restaurant, there are so many organizations we could support, but we want to make sure people in these more rural areas are fed. Another article has to do with lots on the Outer Cape. 20 Outer Cape parcels are in real estate purgatory. After decades of unpaid taxes, parcels are simply listed as owner unknown. In Truro, across the Cape's three outermost towns, there are 20 properties stuck in real estate purgatory. Year after year, town assessors mail out tax bills addressed to owner unknown, a figment of the bureaucratic imagination that rarely, if ever, pays a bill. Truro has 12 properties whose owners are unknown. Provincetown and Wellfleet each have 4 such properties, and Eastham has none, according to the town's assessors. The 20 properties, all vacant lots, cost the 3 outermost towns a combined $3,802 in tax revenue in fiscal 2026, a drop in the bucket compared to town budgets that range from $28 million to $44 million. Although the owner-unknown properties here are mostly undevelopable, the fact that many have remained unresolved for decades speaks to the quirks and challenges of town government work. We're reading handwritten deeds from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and the deeds are talking about going to the hollow at the oak tree, Truro assessor John Nahas said. The way they describe things is very nonspecific, so things eventually just get lost in translation. Then things start changing hands. And when deeds change hands, it's very common to just roll over the history and say, whatever rights you had, we're giving that to the new owner, even if no one really knows what rights those are, Nahas said. Sometimes, he said, people sell a quarter or an eighth of their possible interest in a piece of real estate, making things even more convoluted. One reason parcels can persist for decades with unknown owners is that it would be expensive and time-consuming for towns to seek permission from land court to foreclose on them. The costs can outweigh the benefits, especially for vacant, undevelopable lots. Town staff can do preliminary research, but clearing a title eventually requires a lawyer. Just for the title research alone, it could be $5,000 per parcel, Lesson said. We just haven't had the capacity yet to pursue them. My sense of the law is that there's a lot of deference shown to property owners across the board, Lesson said. That means whenever the town wants to do anything, there's a high burden of proof to do it. The process has always been cumbersome, said Adam Chapdelaine, executive director of the Mass Municipal Association. It's what you'd expect when you're trying to take private property as the government. You need to secure outside legal support. Still, Nahas said he hopes to begin preliminary research on the owner-unknown properties in the next fiscal year. Several of the owner-unknown properties in Truro are undevelopable wetlands, which might be why nobody claims them. Those parcels tend not to be worth anything because they're underwater, so people don't care, Nahas said. Fred Gechter, president of the Truro Conservation Trust, said he's been keeping an eye on the owner-unknown properties around Pilgrim Pond and Mill Pond because the trust already owns land bordering those properties. If the town were able to secure control and auction them off, we would certainly participate in that process to see if we could gain ownership, Gechter said. The pond is important to us, and to maintain its viability, we'd like to have as many of the properties near the pond under our conservation stewardship as possible. In development, DePaulo's mixed-use proposal for Bubala's site stalls at Planning Board. A court case against the Select Board adds a legal challenge. In Provincetown, developer Victor DePaulo's proposed mixed-use project for 183 through 185 Commercial Street, the Bubala's by the Bay restaurant property, still needs several special permits and waivers. But despite many adjustments, DePaulo's plans have so far not been able to satisfy the expectations of some planning board members. DePaulo plans to replace Bubala's with a 3-story building that would house a 100-seat restaurant, 9 hotel rooms, 8 market-rate condos, and 2 condos with affordable deed restrictions. The project also includes a public boardwalk on the town landing side, running from Commercial Street to an area overlooking the harbor with a set of stairs to the beach. An Americans with Disabilities Act accessible paved walkway and patio area is proposed on the side of the building near the Hideaway restaurant. An informal poll taken at the end of the August 13 Planning Board discussion, which involved 3 alternate members sitting in for 3 full members that night, showed 2 votes in favor of the plan and 3 opposed. That's not close to the supermajority, 4 or 5 votes, needed to secure the required permits. At the request of attorney Robin Reed, representing DePaulo, the board continued the hearing to September 10th. The project also faces a new obstacle in the form of a complaint filed in Barnstable Superior Court against the Select Board by a group of 10 Provincetown taxpayers on August 11th. The complaint questions the legality of a curb cut the board authorized on July 27th, which provides access to a small parking garage at 183-185 Commercial, with 6 parking spots for condo owners. The curb cut is on the adjacent town-owned Court Street landing. A hearing on an emergency request for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction to halt all action on the curb cut and enjoin the planning board from acting on the pending permit requests has been scheduled for September 1st in Barnstable. The complaint claims that the Select Board, without authority, allowed municipal infrastructure and a state-protected common landing to be used by a private commercial venture. The Court Street landing comprises a public corridor starting at Commercial Street and extending to the harbor, the complainants argue, and the Select Board's authorization of the requested 23-foot curb cut violates the provisions of Provincetown's curb cut guidelines, which cap the width of curb cuts at 18 feet. The complaint seeks a permanent court order nullifying the Select Board's approval of the curb cut and instituting a permanent injunction prohibiting the board from granting private vehicular access over the town landing without authorization from the Mass Legislature. Meanwhile, at the Planning Board, Joe Smith of 151A Commercial Street used the public comment period at the August 13 Planning Board meeting to urge support for DePaulo's proposal. "We talk constantly of the importance of becoming less dependent on a short summer season," Smith said. Under DePaulo's proposal, he said, the town receives affordable housing, public waterfront access, year-round economic activity, additional tax revenue, jobs, and investment in Commercial Street. On the opposing side, Gordon Siegel told the Planning Board about the Superior Court complaint against the Select Board and argued that the Planning Board should not take action on the requested permits that night. An article on policing. Former Crown and Anchor owner charged with trafficking meth. Jonathan Hawkins, arrested on July 15th, has pleaded not guilty. In Barnstable, Jonathan Hawkins, 39, a former owner of Provincetown's Crown and Anchor Entertainment Complex, was charged with trafficking methamphetamine on July 15th, according to Barnstable District Court records. Hawkins was driving on Route 6 around 2:30 a.m. on July 15 when a Yarmouth police officer stopped him and found approximately 77 grams of crystal meth, 17 different types of pills, and drug paraphernalia in the car, according to a police report. Jonathan has pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and denies all allegations, said a spokesperson for Hawkins' nonprofit, Prouder Together, which produces live performances and pride-themed events. The case remains pending, and the allegations contained in the police report have not been proven in court. Jonathan intends to address this matter through the legal process. The charges against Hawkins include 1 felony, trafficking between 36 and 100 grams of methamphetamine, 15 misdemeanor counts of possession of a Class E drug, the least serious category of controlled substances in Massachusetts, and 2 motor vehicle charges. Hawkins was released on $15,000 bail on July 16. His arrest comes amid a public push for increased drug trafficking enforcement in Provincetown. At a select board meeting on May 26, all 5 board members asked Police Chief Greg Hennick to ramp up investigations and arrests of drug trafficking in town, particularly of methamphetamine. Board Chair Dave Abramson said that meth is probably the most challenging drug there is to quit and stay sober from, and that there's a lot of people in the community that want to see something done about meth use. Hennick said he agreed with the board's direction. "I don't view substance abuse as a crime. That's a disorder," he said on May 26. "We want to go after the people who are supplying drugs right now." 1 week after Hawkins' arrest, the Provincetown Police raided licensing board member Joe Centrella's house on July 22nd and seized about 40 grams of suspected cocaine, along with 34.5 grams of suspected MDMA and 92 grams of psilocybin mushrooms. Centrella pleaded not guilty to cocaine trafficking and 5 lesser offenses, said his lawyer, Tom Kokonowski. He denied all allegations against him. Hawkins had bought the Crown and Anchor with Paolo Martini in 2021. They married in 2022. Hawkins and Martini filed for divorce in 2024. They sold the Crown and Anchor to entrepreneur Tristan Shucraft's company, Trist Hospitality, in March. Martini posted Hawkins' $15,000 cash bail on July 16, and Hawkins was released on the condition that he not operate a motor vehicle, obey all laws, and notify the court of any changes in residence. Martini declined to comment for this story. Hawkins is due to appear in Barnstable District Court for a probable cause hearing on September 14th. In the area of elections, Representative Keating faces challenger in Democratic primary for U.S. House. Craig Swallow of New Bedford says he'll be a more accessible progressive champion. In Provincetown, for the first time in 8 years, Democratic voters on September 1st here will have a choice of who to nominate for the U.S. House of Reps. Bill Keating, a born Democrat who has represented Cape Cod for 16 years, has a challenger in Craig Swallow, a former New Bedford restaurant manager and teacher who has never held public office. Keating, 73, was first elected to the Massachusetts 8th District seat in 2010. After redistricting drew his Quincy home into Rep. Stephen Lynch's district, he moved to Bourne and ran in 2012 for the Massachusetts 9th District, which includes the Cape and Islands, most of the South Coast, and the South Shore up to Cohasset. He last faced a primary challenger in 2018, handily defeating Bill Cimbrello of Barnstable in that race. Swallow, 40, is running as a progressive. Like Keating, he supports Medicare for all. He also wants to implement reforms such as banning congressional stock trading and setting term limits for members of Congress and the Supreme Court. The winner of the primary will face R. Tyler McAllister, the only declared Republican candidate and a former member of the Mattapoisett Select Board, in the November 3rd general election. Swallow's challenge to Keating reflects a broader trend in this cycle of younger, more progressive Democrats running against incumbents from Colorado to Michigan to New York. If the party wins a majority, Swallow said he would not support Representative Hakeem Jeffries as House Speaker. Keating has said he would support Jeffries. Swallow said he sees himself in the mold of other challengers to House incumbents in Massachusetts, citing Jeremy Whalen, Jason Poulos, and Patrick Roth, who's challenging Lynch in the 8th District. Swallow, who has raised $33,000 to Keating's $380,000 $100,000, lacks some of the progressive endorsements and institutional support that other challengers have received. The Massachusetts Teachers Association, for example, which endorsed Whalen, Poulos, and Roth, has endorsed Representative Keating. In soccer, in loss to Upper Cape, Nauset Storm cedes chance at Davis Cup. The team claimed season title and led Cape Cod Soccer League in scoring. Eastham. It was a coordinated offense by a pair of Upper Cape players that broke a 1-1 stalemate in the first semifinals game for the Nauset Storm at Nauset High School on August 5th, when Jack Gouveia headed the ball off a free kick by Michael Tochi. The goal put the 2026 Davis Cup out of reach for the 2025 champions. They lumped a ball into the box, and one of their players rose above and got a head on it, Storm captain Pat Phelan said of the opponent's winning goal. They're a well-organized team, very disciplined. It was tough to come from behind after that. Upper Cape, seeded fourth of 7 teams, won the match 2-1, then lost 4-2 to a third-seeded Athletic Club Independence in the finals on August 9th. In the Cape Cod League, where players often commute from off-Cape and have to juggle their playing schedules with work or school, having a consistent focal point, like Holbert on offense, can be critical to a team's success, Phelan said, who is the team captain. When you have a guy who scores a lot of goals, the defense tends to focus on that person, he said. The last few years, we've struggled to have a go-to striker, so Cody was a big spark for us. McNully said he considered the season a success, but found the playoff loss nonetheless frustrating. He said a long break between the Storm's games may have been at least partly to blame for the loss, thanks to a regular season bye on June 26, a makeup game that never materialized on June 29th, and a first-round playoff bye on August 2nd. The team hadn't played since a July 22 game against Upper Cape, when they faced them in the semifinals. We were a little rusty, McCulley said, and in the semifinals, if you give up 2 goals, you're asking for trouble. But Stevens was optimistic about 2027. You'd be very hard-pressed to find a coach who has the genuine love and passion for the game that McCulley does, he said. I think the future looks bright, for sure. And in Arts Briefs for August 20th, 2026 through August 27, 26. From street to palace to Provincetown. This weekend, the Commons, 46 Bradford Street, Provincetown, will be transformed into a punk-to-posh runway with Jimmy Mama Lee Curtis's annual fashion show returns for a trip across the pond. London Calling takes place on Saturday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. and will feature looks by more than 35 Outer Cape artists, each offering their take on everything bold and British. The event began in 2020 as a collaboration between Curtis and Dave LaFrance, operations director of the Commons. Curtis's background in fashion includes studies at the Atlanta College of Art and the American College in London, where in the 1980s he was a club kid inspired by designers and artists Lee Bowery and Michael Clark. Although London is the central theme of this year's event, its organizers say that the show is still fundamentally about what makes Provincetown special. France says that at its core, the event will be about Provincetown's magic and its unity. In a world that often divides us, we hope to bring people together, he says. This is the first year there will be an admission charge for the show, which proceeds with proceeds benefiting the Commons. This year's program includes a group exhibition, The Queens and the Flamboyant Kings, along with a screen printing workshop by artist Charlie Welch and an embellishment workshop where designers can further personalize their runway looks and accessories. Tickets are $25 at provincetowncommons.org. This is Gail reading from this week's edition of the Provincetown Independent. Have a nice day.